Everyone, Jared Sandler here with you. Time for a Rangers video Q&A. Offseason, I guess, hasn't really officially started. Rangers have made a big move already, though, with the hiring of Bruce Bochy. The offseason will really start in earnest upon the completion of the World Series, but work to be done for teams like the Rangers who are not in the postseason and not participating at this time. Obviously, the goal is to be playing baseball into November. But anyway, wanted to answer some questions. Took the first 5 that came through on Twitter. We'll try and answer the others that came in just by responding to your tweets. But let's get the show on the road here. First question comes from Kenny. He wants to know, is the Rangers window truly open enough to go for it with more veterans in free agency when it's pretty obvious that Houston isn't going anywhere and Seattle will likely be even better with money to spend this winter? Well, 2 points that Kenny makes there. 1, Houston not going anywhere, and 2, that Seattle doesn't seem to be going anywhere either. And if anything, the arrow is really pointing up for them. Are incredibly fair. I'm not going to dispute that, in any way, shape, or form. The AL West has not really been a division that you'd consider a gauntlet in recent years, but I think that it is heading in that direction. And then, Oakland once every 4 years will put together a team that wins like 90 games. And then maybe they do it again for another year, and then they sell all the parts and they get back to being a 60, 70 win team. But they're due to trend up here in 2 years or so. I think the Rangers window, in a way, is not really determined by the competition, because if they put together a World Series caliber roster, it's a World Series caliber roster. They're not there yet, obviously. But, when you sign Semien and Seager, you kind of start the process of needing to build that roster, right? And no one was really wanting them to stall and pause just because, there's tough competition in the division. The Astros might end up winning the World Series, but the Mariners, even though they got swept, and it's going to sound odd, they were incredibly close to, being the team that moved on. There was a home run late in Game 1 by Yordan Alvarez, another in Game 2, and then the Game 3 went to 29 innings or whatever it was. So, it's not like the Mariners were far behind, but in the standings, they were. So you just get in the dance and things can happen. The other thing with windows is, the perception of your window and the reality of your window very rarely match up. And more often than not, the window is not open as wide as you think it is. But you take the Astros, their window's been much wider than what, we thought it was. And you take the Cubs, who won the World Series, 5-6 years ago, and their window closed right away. I think we all thought after they won the World Series, they might not win multiple World Series. That's tough to say, but man, certainly think they'll get back to another one, and they really haven't been close. So, I think the hope is the Rangers, with, the years spent without playoff baseball, are now building something that will be wide open for a while. And the Astros, I know it's tough to envision this, but they're not just going to stay this good for forever, even though it feels like, they're not going anywhere. And so I think that division is going to be very competitive, but I also think that there is going to be an opportunity for the Rangers. But that's a great question. We got another question here from Yeetus Tweetus, who wants to know who the Rangers, who my top 3 players Texas needs to go after this offseason are. I'm actually going to give 2 sets of 3. One is, the more direct answer to the question. Jacob deGrom is number 1. I don't think the Rangers are going to get him, but you absolutely have to go after him, and you've got the money, so why not? Carlos Rodon is number 2. I think the Rangers have a much greater chance of getting Carlos Rodon, although, whenever the Dodgers or the Yankees enter the mix, that's never a great sign, and the Dodgers have made it clear, apparently, that they are going to be making a push for Rodon. But again, the Rangers need pitching. They've got the money. Go after the 2 best starting pitching free agents on the market. Why not? You need to do that. The third is not necessarily the 3rd best player, but I think the Rangers absolutely need to upgrade their lineup, right? I don't know that this is the offseason in which they're gonna spend major bucks to add someone, but I think that there is a guy out there who could really upgrade their lineup, who I don't think is going to cost major bucks, unless it's a 1-year prove-it deal where he re-enters the market, which, if it is, that's totally fine. But I don't know that he's going to be an incredible expense. And that's Michael Conforto. Can play a corner outfield spot. Coming off a down year, didn't play last year. Took the year off to get healthy, to get better. Prior to that, the year before, it was an oddly off year for him. But if you look at his track record, he's been really, really good. He's a name that is intriguing to me. The next set of three are guys who they're kind of wild cards. One is Edwin Diaz. I don't know if the Rangers are prepared to spend $100 million, on a closer. And I don't know if Edwin Diaz will command $100 million, but he'll command at least 75, I think. And I don't know if they'd be prepared to do that, but I wouldn't hate it. Carlos Correa, another wild card. I don't get the sense the Rangers were really in on Correa last year. And I don't get the sense Correa is going to end up in Texas. I feel like Pinstripes is probably where he's headed, but I've always loved the guy. I've always loved him as a player. I think he'd be great in the clubhouse. You could move Corey Seager over at that point if you felt like that was the best combination. To me, Carlos Correa is a special player. He's an interesting name. And the other one, not a top of the rotation guy, but Nathan Eovaldi, especially if the Rangers bring back Kevin Plawecki, which I think they might. I think they got a shot at getting Nathan Eovaldi from Alvin, Texas. He could be a nice little reclamation project. All right, question from Carter. Will additions to the bullpen be more of a priority now that John Daniels isn't involved in the personnel decisions? I think the first part of that question is a fair one. Will additions to the bullpen be more of a priority? I think the second part's a little unfair. If you think about it, people really haven't invested in relievers for all of baseball history, right? It's really been, I don't want to say since Andrew Miller almost helped carry the then Indians to a World Series. It wasn't just him, but at that point, the multi-inning reliever and the non-closing reliever became a more lucrative role. Prior to that, there really wasn't a whole lot of investment made in that department. When you look at John Daniels, when the Rangers became good initially, they had Neftali Feliz. They had a closer, and they had a really good bullpen. And then they go and sign Joe Nathan. He did invest in the bullpen, right? 2015, Sean Tollison takes over for Neftali Feliz. He had a great year. And then Sam Dyson took over for Sean Tollison. But the Rangers ended up in 15 after a slow start, had a great bullpen. Bullpen was fine in 16 as well, en route to the best record in the American League. And then the Rangers weren't competitive. And teams that are not competitive typically don't invest long-term in relievers. They might sign a good reliever to a 1-year deal or maybe a 2-year deal to try and trade them. But bad teams don't invest in relievers. So I would say that, if you look at the trajectory of how relievers have been compensated and the evolution of their roles, John Daniels never oversaw a team that was pushing for the playoffs after that mid-2016 season, right? But I also think that in the past, when the team was competitive, there were investments made. With that said, I do think the Rangers are going to invest in the bullpen. It might not be Edwin Diaz, we talked about that a second ago, but I do think that adding less volatile, more bona fide relief help is going to be a priority. Andrew Morris wants to know about Adolis Garcia. He says, saw an article that linked Adolis Garcia as a potential trade target for the Marlins. His question is, what's a realistic return for him? And who would the Rangers go after in free agency to fill that hole? Well, if they're trading Adolis Garcia, it's probably because they're getting pitching back. The Rangers are not at this point in the business of making a trade for success down the road. It's not that they're going all in right now, but I don't think they're going to trade Adolis Garcia for prospects, right? I think if they're trading Adolis Garcia, it's because he is, the primary piece or a part of the package to bring back pitching. So, the most likely name there is Pablo Lopez. Adolis Garcia on his own is not enough to get Sandy Alcantara. Maybe he's a part of a bigger package. Adolis Garcia for Pablo Lopez could be a really interesting, main centerpiece of a deal. It might not be much more than that. If it's Trevor Rogers and you're buying low on Trevor Rogers, you're probably getting something else back in return. But that's what the type of return would be. And as far as, who the Rangers could go after, I don't know if they would go after a long-term solution right away. Again, I mentioned Michael Conforto. But if the Rangers trade Adolis Garcia, then they've got, 2 corner outfield needs, right? Nothing is set in the corner outfield outside of Adolis Garcia. And frankly, nothing set, in any of the outfield spots except for Adolis. Center field isn't locked down either. The Rangers have plenty of options on the internal side, guys who aren't there yet, but who could grow. So I don't know if the Rangers would want to lock down 2 long-term acquisitions, externally for corner spots if they move Adolis. But Michael Conforto is a corner outfield name to watch again. I'll reiterate that. Of interest to me. I'm not there. I don't have any inside track that the Rangers are heavily pursuing him. Last question from Gabe. What are some free agent targets you anticipate the Rangers going after this offseason? Does the hiring of Bruce Bochy accelerate the timeline of competing for the playoffs? So I chose Gabe's question. The first part is kind of a repeat of, the second question I answered. So I would just say refer back to that in the interest of time. It's, obviously a great question, but I wanted to address the second part. Does the hiring of Bruce Bochy accelerate the timeline of competing? Absolutely. You're not hiring Bruce Bochy unless you have eyes of competing immediately. And Bruce Bochy's not coming here unless, that he believes in that vision. Now, that doesn't mean this year's playoffs are bust at this point. Let's see what the Rangers do in the offseason. But I do think that if the Rangers are not a playoff team by next year, it will be viewed as a disappointment based on that timeline. So I think that, Bruce Bochy's probably not here for 10 years, right? I mean, whenever you hire a manager, you always think early on in the honeymoon period, oh, that guy will be here forever. But with Bruce Bochy's age, I don't know that he's going to manage till he's 77. Maybe he will. But I think you're hiring Bruce Bochy to help set the foundation for maybe competing in a much wider window than just his tenure. But you absolutely want that competitive window to start in his tenure. Otherwise, that he's not the type of guy that you would hire. And I thought Tony Beasley actually was very eloquent in the way he kind of communicated that when asked about, whether he was disappointed he didn't get it. He said, no, listen, we want to win now. I'm more of a long-term type of hire because, you have to be patient and grow with me, allow me to grow with the team. Whereas Bruce Bochy is a guy that comes in ready to go right away. So I think that's the best way to maybe characterize it with what Beasley had to say there. All right. Had some fun. Talk to y'all later. Take care.